All right, today we're going to talk about 3 layers of aspect interpretation, and we're going to discuss the planetary interpretations that are based upon more than just the aspects being stressed aspects or being benefic, we call benefic aspects. We're going to talk about them in terms of their actual mental, emotional, and physical meaning of these planetary aspects, because there's 3 really different ways to approach an aspect. And very often when you're doing charts, the most important is not one or the other. It's the fact that they all need to be discussed. You can't just talk about one aspect, mental, that affects, of course, the emotional, affects the physical. They're all interrelated. So you need to understand that when you're doing charts. And it'll give you a much more thorough reading of a chart than without this knowledge. The sun, for example, in your chart, it equals your spirit, your life, your ego, your need for recognition and praise. Okay, that's very important. You have to recognize the sun rules Leo. Leo is a sign that we say needs praise. It's a sign that it's the tribe of Judah, which is in the 12 tribes of Israel, relate to the 12 signs, and the lion of Judah, and this is the sign of the lion. So the sun is the conscious mind, it's the spirit, it's your will, it's your purpose and your life force. The sun also in a chart, very few people recognize this, I think sometimes, is the loving father. You say, well, what about an unloving father? That's Saturn. Saturn is the planet of the father too, but it's a disciplinary father. It's the father that sets the limits for you in your life, that says you can or can't do something. And so it's the restrictive father is Saturn. The sun is the life of the father that is much more the loving father. The sun represents the heart, the back, and courage, determination and purpose in life. The sun represents courage in the fact that it is, it goes back to Leo again, the lion. It's a very courageous animal. And we are always looking to the sun to see how a person, what their life spirit's about, what their will to live is. When you talk about people have a will to live, even though they're maybe in a disaster or in a calamity in their life, they still have a strong will to live. And when you say will, every time you use that word, you're talking about what? The sun. The key word for Leo is I will. So you recognize that. So, you know, I have 2 children that are Leos, a daughter and a son. Andre, by my wife and I, who is very strong-willed. I could never break his will. He would break mine first. Beautiful kid that taught me a lot about being a father and about things that I needed to work on in my own life. So the determination and purpose in life is seen by that. Fire signs give a lot more of that energy to live and to experience life, the fire signs being Aries, Sagittarius, and Leo. So the reason is it's a natural environment for the sun. The sun does really well in fire signs, okay? It doesn't mean that the earth signs or the water signs don't have a strong will. It's just that there are different motivations and different drives in those signs. You know, we talk about Taurus. Yes, you know, it's a will to live. It's stubborn, so it doesn't let go either. It's tenacious, okay? But when we talk about fire, we talk about the sun, basically. So the moon is the soul. It's your feelings. It's your subconscious mind. The moon equals your habits, your food addictions, your unconscious behavior. It's emotional needs. It's your emotional needs. It's the child within us. It's the mother. It's the nurturing influence in your chart. So when we talk about habits, food addictions, when you were a child and you were crying or you're upset, what did your mother do? She put you to her, either put a bottle in your mouth or her nipple of her breast in your mouth so that you would suckle her nurturing, which is the mother's milk. And of course, all of those things, these habits, are continued throughout life. Most people that have trouble with dieting, for example, have a lot of emotional issues that drive them to constantly seek nurturing through food. It's a comfort thing, and it comes back to habits again, which is what the moon is. The moon is your subconscious, and your subconscious rules what? All your habitual behavior. things that you do really without much willful control over. And if you think about habits, that's what it's about. You try to break a habit from doing something that's injurious to you, whether it's drugs or cigarettes or whatever the addiction is. It's very difficult to break it. The will is the determining factor whether that's accomplished or not. And by that I mean the sun. That helps determine the strength of your will. But very few times does the will rule or actually dominate the subconscious drives. It generally doesn't. It doesn't do well at it. Okay, it's a fight that's not always won. So the child within us, again, that's the part of us that's, if you would, the moon in the chart indicates our kind of immaturity, areas where we need to grow. For example, I have, when I was born, I have a grand cross on my moon. And of course, the grand cross on the moon is indicative of a lot of lessons that I had to learn regarding those planets that are on that moon in that cross. For example, Venus, which is relationships, okay? Jupiter, which is extremes, and breaking the limits. When I was young, I had more tickets and driving than anybody. I had a cop chase me for 50 miles one time in California. He almost blew up his engine doing it, and he took him. I didn't know he was on my tail. He'd been chasing me for over 50 miles, and I was doing over 110 miles an hour. And of course, I was young and stupid at the time, and he said I could put you in jail, but he said I'm not. I'm just going to give you a good ticket. So you'll be paying a while for that one. So anyway, the message is that you look at these planets, and if they're an aspect of the moon, it's important to recognize that these are areas of immaturity very often when you see afflictions. Okay, they're areas where you need to grow and need to learn lessons. The good aspects of these aspects are karmic very often. A lot of trine aspects, sextiles, tell that these are areas you've grown in the past. And I believe in past lives. I believe you've been here before. You'll be here again. And these are messages of where you have developed your qualities of character and other things that are in your chart. It basically lets us know that. So if we go to the next, the Venus and our need for love, affection, union, harmony, and peace. Venus covers sweets, ability to receive or give affection, artistic expression, and relationships, business or personal. In general, they cover that. So you say Venus rules sweets. It's something that is definitely related. I've often seen amazing parallels between planetary aspects and health and issues that we deal with, for example, in life. For example, Venus rules your kidneys, and Venus rules sweets. And I find that quite interesting because one of the first things that happens to a diabetic is a threat to their kidneys. And that's from eating too much sweet. So in my case, for example, I acknowledge I have that. I have Venus on a cross in my chart. It's on that cross with that moon. So I'm very compulsive about loving sweets. It's something that I recognize. And remember, the moon is compulsions. It's the subconscious drives. So if we're talking about compulsive behavior, we want to look at the moon, okay? So this is all connected. It's amazing how it all pulls together, even scientifically in many respects, that you will look at some of these aspects. So this is Venus, okay? Mars, that's your drives. It's anger, fear, it's courage. It's aggression, it's anger, it's conscious, willful passion and drives. It rules over things like surgery, scars, violence. We, for example, say we have a Mar in our personality, a Mar. What is that? It implies something that's related to Mars. And we don't realize we're using words like that. We use the word mark, okay? Many of the words that are related to Mars actually sound a lot like scars, is another example. These words denote an injury of some kind. And Mars, of course, governs these kinds of things in our life. So if you have a Mars affliction in your chart, it can indicate that there's areas where you need to be concerned with your well-being. For example, I have Mars squaring my Mercury and my Sun in my chart. It's afflicting those planets. Now, what does that indicate in my chart? It indicates a danger to my heart, Mars squaring the Sun. The Sun rules your heart. It also rules the back. And I've had back problems all my life. When I was young, when I was in my 20s, I was a very strong participant in martial arts, and I did a lot of judo. And I threw a guy one time incorrectly. I was not positioned correctly, and I ended up with back problems from that day on, sciatic problems. So those are things that I've had to live with, but that's Mars squaring the Sun. So it rules the back. It rules the heart. So when you see these in a chart, I have Mars squaring Mercury, for example. Mercury rules what? Speech. Okay. I have, when I was young, until I was about 13 years old, maybe 14, I'm not sure, I stuttered very bad. And stuttering was a result of my mind was working so fast and my speech couldn't keep up with it. So I would stutter. I would say things and repeat them over and over again. And it took me years to get over that, taking speech classes. And who would have known that I'd eventually end up doing radio shows all over the United States? That's kind of funny, isn't it? So, but I still talk fast. And my wife notices if I'm hungry, for example, or if I'm a little bit stressed, that I talk fast. And those of you that sit through my classes have to put up with that as well. And for those with a quick mind, it doesn't matter. But for those that can't keep up with me, it can be a challenge sometimes, because Mars can, again, causes things to go fast. Mars is pushing, aggressive. Okay, so when we see these aspects in a chart, we need to look at them on that level. So Jupiter is optimism, faith, future, and present-oriented. Jupiter equals opportunity, its blessings, its fortune, its magnanimity. The word magnanimity, I think, is really a word that describes it the best. Mag means large, and animity is from animal, large animal. I often see people with strong Jupiters in their chart. I tell them you should have a large animal. I was doing a chart for my daughter's fiance, who she's soon to marry, and I was reading the chart and I got this message: you should own horses. Very strong. He's got Jupiter joined with his Sun. Very powerful conjunction. I said, you should own horses. And he turned to my daughter and said, you told him. My daughter says, I didn't tell him anything, because she never does. She just asked me to do the chart. And it turns out he's buying into a stable of horses for horse racing. And it kind of freaked him out when I told him that. But I said, you'll be blessed by that. These horses will bring you a blessing and good things into your life. So Jupiter's magnanimity, it's wisdom, it's charity, it's benevolence. Okay? You notice I don't have anything negative. Well, I'm a Jupiter-ruled guy. I'm Sagittarius, so I'm going to say good things about Jupiter, right? But Jupiter has its faults, and that's excesses. Jupiter does things in extreme. I noticed, I mentioned that I have a Grand Cross in my chart. That means that the negative aspect and meanings of Jupiter can often express in my life. And I know that's true. Whenever I did get in trouble, for example, I remember when I was in the Navy, if I was 5 minutes late getting back to ship and I knew I was going to get in trouble for being late for 5 minutes, it's a serious problem, because you don't come back late to the ship. I decided that, well, if I'm going to be late for 5 minutes, I think I'll just take off. So I'd go off for 30 days and get in real trouble. Let's do it right. If I'm going to get in trouble, let's do it right. So I've often, in my life, some of you that know me in my past, I've done a lot of extreme things, okay? Anyway, back to the benevolence is a good thing of Jupiter. Jupiter is very giving. You got to remember, Jupiter is the archetype for Jesus. Jesus, Zeus, Jesus. And that archetype was what? Compassionate, the healer. Jupiter gives healing ability. Okay, that's one of the things that comes from Jupiter. It's the compassionate, it's the counselor, it's wisdom. It represents the counselor. That's all the things that Jesus was. He was the counselor. He was the healer. He changed and transformed a lot of people's lives with his wisdom. Okay, and there's another scripture that says wisdom is made perfect in love. Okay, so wisdom is one thing, but having great wisdom is when they're joined together. Wisdom is made perfect in love. So you can be pretty wise and have a lot of wisdom, but you may lack love. If you lack love, then you're going to find that your life is not necessarily, even though you have wisdom, it's not necessarily as powerful as it could be. My wife, for example, has Venus conjunct Jupiter when she was born, and that shows wisdom is joined with love. She has that wisdom, and to live with me for 25 years, it took a lot of wisdom and a lot of love, okay? But she's that way. She's got a great amount of love, and that's her compassion and her love is most striking in my mind and what I've seen for 25 years. So, Saturn, pessimism, caution, fear, duty, responsibility, unforgiving sometimes, living in the past, father, disciplined father. Remember we talked about that early, as opposed to the Sun, which is the loving father. Saturn is father time, the measure off of all things. Saturn gives impatience, punctuality, and guilt and accusations, okay? Now, when I say Saturn, Saturn is where the Christians got their Satan, okay? It's the archetype for Satan. Satan in the Bible is called the devourer, a roaring lion who seeketh whom he might devour, the devil, or the devil, the serpent, Satan, the devil. He was called a roaring lion who seeketh whom he might devour. If you go back to the mythological Saturn, Saturn devoured all of his children, okay, but he never got Zeus, Jesus, if you would. He never got Zeus. Zeus is preserved alive, he's hidden in the cave. He grows to manhood, of course, and there's an effort to destroy all the children. When Herod, when Christ was born, we have the same story, don't we? Herod issued an edict, destroy all the children under 2 years old. Why did he do that? Because he heard that there was going to be a child that was going to overthrow his kingdom. And he thought the best way to do that is get rid of them all. If you go back to Moses, who ushered in ended the Tarian age and ushered in the Aries age, Moses was sought after to be destroyed as well. But his mother put him in a reed basket, and he went down the river to be picked up, and of course raised in the court of the Pharaoh, and he survived. Okay, so we